Judge Marcus Holloway stares down at Officers Brennan and Reynolds from his bench. The same men who had him face down on concrete yesterday. "I recognize you both," he says calmly, removing his glasses. "Perhaps you should have checked my bar card before putting those handcuffs on me." Before we dive into this shocking story of justice and accountability, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, no matter their skin color. Now, let's see how Judge Holloway ended up in this powerful position of reckoning. Marcus Holloway wasn't expecting trouble that Tuesday evening. At 45 years old, the respected Philadelphia judge had spent the day at Jefferson Hospital sitting beside his mother, who was recovering from heart surgery. The clock had ticked well past visiting hours before the doctors assured him she was stable, and Marcus finally felt comfortable leaving. He dressed down for the hospital visit, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a navy blue hoodie instead of his usual tailored suit. The casual clothes felt foreign against his skin after years of professional attire, but comfort mattered during the long hours in those stiff hospital chairs. His BMW needed gas, so Marcus pulled into the SoCo station off Roosevelt Boulevard in the predominantly white suburb of Abington Township. He'd heard about a series of convenience store robberies in the area over the past month, but thought nothing of it as he inserted his credit card at pump number 3. The bright fluorescent lights of the station cast harsh shadows across the nearly empty lot as Marcus began pumping gas, his mind still preoccupied with his mother's condition. That's when he first noticed the police cruiser slowly circling the perimeter of the station like a shark sensing blood and water. Officers Thomas Brennan and Kyle Reynolds had been partners for nearly 3 years. Both white men in their early 30s with crew cuts and perpetually stern expressions. They'd built a reputation in the department for aggressive policing and had the highest arrest numbers in their precinct. Their superior officers praised their proactive approach, though several community complaints had been filed against them in the past year alone. All had been dismissed after internal review. Brennan nudged Reynolds and nodded toward Marcus. "Check him out. Matches the description from the VAV while robbery last week." Reynolds squinted through the windshield. "Black male medium, build hood up. Could be our guy." The vague description could have fit thousands of men in Philadelphia, but that didn't seem to trouble either officer. As they pulled their patrol car directly behind Marcus' BMW, blocking him in, Marcus noticed the officers approaching in his peripheral vision, their hands already resting on their holstered weapons. He'd seen this scenario play out countless times in his courtroom, had heard the testimonies, had read the reports. Now it was happening to him. He took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay calm. "Good evening, officers," Marcus said evenly, replacing the gas pump and screwing his gas cap back into place. "Is there a problem?" Officer Brennan stepped forward, his stance wide and authoritative. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" The question was absurd given Marcus was clearly pumping gas, but he recognized the tactic for what it was. "Just getting gas on my way home from the hospital. My mother had surgery." "Let me see some ID," Brennan demanded, not acknowledging Marcus's explanation. Marcus maintained eye contact with the officer. "May I ask why I'm simply getting gas?" Brennan's expression hardened. "You match the description of a suspect in a recent robbery." "ID now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. What exactly is this description beyond blackmail? This question visibly irritated both officers. Reynolds stepped closer. "Sir, we need you to comply with our instructions immediately." Marcus knew his rights, but he also knew the danger of the situation. "I'm reaching for my wallet," he said clearly, slowly moving his hand toward his back pocket. "My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm a judge with the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas." The officers exchanged glances, and Brennan let out a short laugh. "Sure you are. And I'm the police commissioner." Before Marcus could retrieve his wallet, Brennan grabbed his arm and slammed him against the side of his car. The sudden violence shocked Marcus, his cheek pressed hard against the cold metal of his BMW. "What are you doing? This is completely unnecessary." Brennan wrenched Marcus' arms behind his back, while Reynolds kept his hand on his weapon. "Stop resisting," Brennan shouted, though Marcus wasn't fighting back. "I'm not resisting. Marcus said through gritted teeth as handcuffs bit into his wrists. "This is a mistake. My judicial ID is in my wallet." "Yeah, we'll check that downtown," Reynolds said dismissively, beginning to search Marcus' pockets without consent. A young white woman at a nearby pump had taken out her phone and was recording the entire interaction. "Is this really necessary?" she called out. "He's just getting gas." "Ma'am, please stay back," Reynolds ordered without looking at her. "This is police business." The night manager of the gas station, a middle-aged South Asian man named Patel, hurried out from behind the counter. "Officers, I know this man. He comes here often. He's a regular customer, a judge." "Sir, return to the building or you'll be interfering with police business," Brennan barked, already guiding a handcuffed Marcus toward their patrol car. Marcus caught Mr. Patel's eye. "Please call Diane Shin at the courthouse. Tell her what's happening." Patel nodded frantically, backing away as the officers opened the rear door of their cruiser. Marcus felt the ultimate indignity as they pushed his head down and forced him into the back seat like a common criminal. Through the window, he could see more people gathering phones, recording as the officers got into the front seat. "This is a mistake," Marcus said again, his judicial temperament fighting against rising anger. "You're making a very serious mistake." "They all say that," Reynolds replied, putting the car in drive. As they pulled away from the gas station, Marcus watched his BMW grow smaller in the distance, along with his dignity and constitutional rights. The ride to the Abington Township Police Station took less than 10 minutes, but for Marcus, it stretched into an eternity of humiliation and disbelief. Each bump in the road pressed the uncomfortable handcuffs deeper into his wrists, a physical reminder of his sudden powerlessness. From the front seat, Officers Brennan and Reynolds chatted casually as though transporting groceries rather than a human being. "Got another one claiming to be important," Brennan said with a chuckle. "Last week it was some guy saying he was the mayor's cousin." Reynolds snorted. "Remember that lady who said she was a neurosurgeon? Turned out she had 3 warrants." Marcus remained silent, knowing anything he said would be twisted or ignored. He'd seen enough cases to understand that this moment wasn't about reason or facts. The station was a squat brick building with harsh fluorescent lighting that seemed designed to strip away humanity. They parked in a reserved spot near the rear entrance away from public view. When they pulled him from the car, Marcus straightened his back, determined to maintain whatever dignity remained. Inside the booking area, buzzed with the mundane efficiency of systematic dehumanization. The booking sergeant, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl, barely looked up as they entered. "Got a gas station loiter who matches the Wahoa robbery suspect," Brennan announced, pushing Marcus forward. "Claims he's a judge." This last part elicited snickers from 2 other officers completing paperwork nearby. The sergeant finally looked up, his eyes quickly scanning Marcus before returning to his computer screen. "Name?" he asked flatly. "Marcus Holloway," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the practiced authority of his courtroom. "I'm a judge with the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas, and I demand my phone call immediately." The sergeant's expression didn't change. "Sure you are. Empty your pockets on the counter." Marcus remained still. "I like to make my phone call first, as is my right." This small assertion of constitutional knowledge seemed to irritate everyone in the room. The sergeant stood up. "Look, buddy, this goes a lot smoother if you cooperate. Empty your pockets. We'll take your prints, and then maybe you can make your call." Marcus understood the game being played. They were deliberately delaying his call to prevent him from contacting anyone who could verify his identity. Still handcuffed, he couldn't empty his pockets anyway. "I cannot empty my pockets while restrained," he pointed out, "and I know my rights. I am entitled to a phone call upon booking." Brennan stepped forward, roughly removing the handcuffs. "There. Now, empty your pockets like the sergeant asked." The physical relief of having the cuffs removed was overshadowed by the psychological weight of the situation. Marcus methodically placed his items on the counter: wallet, keys, phone, hospital parking receipt, a half-eaten roll of mints. The sergeant picked up the wallet and opened it, his expression unchanged as he examined Marcus's driver's license. He flipped through the other cards without comment, even when he came to the judicial identification card with the state seal, clearly visible. "Take off your belt and shoes, Bo," the sergeant instructed, setting the wallet aside. Marcus complied, the cold floor seeping through his socks. Each item removed felt like another piece of his humanity being stripped away. He thought of the countless defendants who stood in this same spot, many without his knowledge of the law, many without resources or connections. How many have been processed through this same dehumanizing system with no one to witness their dignity being eroded? A younger officer approached the booking area carrying a coffee cup. He glanced at Marcus, then did a visible double-take. "Judge Holloway?" he asked, his voice uncertain. The room fell silent. Marcus recognized the young black officer, but couldn't place him. "Yes, officer. Jackson, sir. Daryl Jackson. You gave a lecture at the academy last year. Constitutional rights during arrests." He looked around at his colleagues, clearly uncomfortable. "Is everything okay here?" The sergeant's demeanor shifted slightly. "You know this guy, Jackson?" Officer Jackson nodded. "Yes, sir. He's definitely a judge. I attended his lecture on proper arrest procedures and constitutional protections." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The sergeant looked back at Marcus' ID, this time examining the judicial card more carefully. His face padded slightly. Officer Jackson stepped closer to the sergeant and whispered something. The sergeant immediately picked up his phone and dialed an extension. "Captain, you need to come down to booking now." Within minutes, the atmosphere in the station had transformed completely. Captain William Preston, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the polished appearance of someone who spent more time in press conferences than patrol cars, burst into the booking area. His face registered shock when he saw Marcus. "Judge Holloway," he said, his voice suddenly dripping with artificial warmth. "There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Indeed, Captain, a misunderstanding of constitutional rights, proper police procedure, and basic human dignity." The captain's smile faltered. "Let's get those items back to you right away. Can I offer you some coffee? Perhaps we can discuss this in my office." "No, thank you," Marcus replied coolly. "I would prefer to follow proper procedure. I believe I'm entitled to a phone call." The captain nodded vigorously. Of course. You can use my private line, if you'd prefer." "The regular booking phone will be fine," Marcus insisted. "I wouldn't want any special treatment." This was delivered with just enough emphasis to make the captain cease. As Marcus was led to the phone, he noticed Officers Brennan and Reynolds being summoned into what he presumed was the captain's office. Through the glass windows, he could see animated gestures and defensive postures. They were already constructing their narrative. He realized creating the story that would protect the department and justify their actions. Marcus dialed not a lawyer, but his colleague, Judge Diane Chun, who handled police misconduct cases. He kept his voice measured as he explained the situation, aware of Officer Jackson hovering nearby, clearly torn between loyalty to his department and his evident respect for Marcus. As he spoke with Judge Chun, Marcus watched the station transform around him. Word had spread quickly, and officers were whispering among themselves, casting nervous glances his way. The sergeant, who had dismissed his judicial ID, was now furiously typing at his computer, likely documenting everything to protect himself. In the captain's office, the discussion had grown more heated. Reynolds was pointing animatedly, while Brennan stood with arms crossed, his face set in stubborn lines. Captain Preston was on his phone, his free hand rubbing his forehead in clear distress. By the time Marcus finished his call, his belongings had been gathered and placed in a plastic bag, his belt and shoes returned. Captain Preston emerged from his office, his professional smile back in place, but strange showing around his eyes. "Judge Holloway, I want to personally apologize for this unfortunate incident. Officers Brennan and Reynolds were responding to a series of robberies in the area and were simply being vigilant." Marcus accepted his belongings, but not the excuse. "Vigilance doesn't justify constitutional violations, Captain. As I'm sure you're aware, matching a description requires more specific identifying characteristics than simply blackmail." The captain's smile tightened. "Yes, well, in the heat of the moment, officers must make split-second decisions. And those decisions have consequences, Marcus replied evenly. I'll be declining to sign any statement or waiver. I expect a full report of this incident to be filed unaltered. Before the captain could respond, Officer Jackson approached tentatively. Sir, your car is still at the Sinaco station. I'll be happy to give you a ride back. Marcus nodded, grateful for the young officer's integrity. As they prepared to leave, Marcus noticed his phone buzzing with notifications. The gas station video had already been uploaded to social media and was spreading rapidly. By morning, everyone would know what had happened to Judge Marcus Holloway. And unknown to Officers Brennan and Reynolds, their actions tonight would have consequences they couldn't possibly imagine. As Marcus walked out of the station with his dignity intact, but his faith in the system shaken, he already knew what tomorrow would bring. Sometimes justice arrived in unexpected ways. Marcus stood in the driveway of his Chestnut Hill colonial home, watching Officer Jackson's patrol car disappear around the corner. The irony wasn't lost on him being escorted home by the same police department that had just violated his rights. The neighborhood was quiet, most houses dark except for porch lights. Mrs. Abernathy from next door was walking her terrier, but did a poor job hiding her surprise at seeing Marcus' disheveled appearance. He raised a hand in greeting, painfully aware of how this scene might appear. A black man in casual clothes looking unkempt in an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood. Would she be one of those neighbors who called the police reporting a suspicious person? The thought made his stomach clench. His key turned in the lock, and Marcus stepped into the warmth of his home. The familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon from Vanessa's candles should have been comforting. But tonight, even home felt different. Dad. Jamal's voice broke through his thoughts as a 17-year-old son rushed from the living room, phone in hand. Behind him, 14-year-old Zora appeared in the hallway, her eyes wide with worry. We saw the video, Jamal said, his voice tight with anger. It's everywhere online. Marcus set down his belongings and embraced his children, holding them tighter than usual. Over their heads, he saw Vanessa emerge from the kitchen, her attorney's analytical expression warring with a wife's concern. Are you hurt? She asked, her eyes scanning him for injuries. Physically, no, Marcus Anserdanistli. He guided his family into the living room, where the local news played silently on the television. Sure enough, grainy cell phone footage of his arrest was playing with the caption, Philadelphia judge arrested at gas station. They settled on the sectional sofa, the children pressed close to him, as though their proximity could protect him retroactively. I can file for emergency injunctive relief first thing in the morning, Vanessa said, her lawyer mind already mapping out strategies. We can have a civil rights suit prepared by noon. I'll call Michael at the ACLU. Marcus shook his head slowly. Not yet. Vanessa's eyebrows rose. Marcus, they assaulted a sitting judge. This is the clearest case of racial profiling I've seen in years. We need a strike while public outrage is high. I have something different in mind, Marcus replied. He turned to his children, seeing the fear and anger in their eyes. This was the reality of being black in America that he'd tried to protect them from even while preparing them for it. Do you remember the talk we had when you started driving? He asked Jamal. His son nodded solemnly. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Say yes, sir. No, sir. Ask permission before reaching for anything. Jamal recited mechanically. Always get their badge numbers, Zora added quietly. Marcus felt his chest tighten. What kind of country forced parents to give such instructions to their children? I followed all those rules tonight, he told them. I was respectful. I identified myself. I moved slowly, and it didn't matter. Zora leaned her head against his shoulder because they didn't see you as a judge. They just saw a black man, Marcus finished for her, and in their minds that was enough to justify suspicion. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Chief Justice Harmon of their judicial district. Marcus excused himself to take it in his home office. Marcus, I just saw the news. This is outrageous. The Chief Justice began without preamble. I've already called the police commissioner and the mayor. They assure me there will be a full investigation. Thank you, Richard, Marcus replied, sinking into his leather chair. I appreciate your support. Of course. Take some time off. I'll reassign your cases for the week. Actually, Marcus said, I'd prefer to keep my schedule, particularly tomorrow's docket. There was a pause on the line. Are you certain no one would question you taking a few days? I'm certain, more than ever, I need to be on that bench tomorrow. After finishing the call, Marcus opened his laptop. The video had indeed gone viral with hundreds of thousands of views already. Comments ranged from outrage to the usual racist justifications. Cable news channels had picked up the story with legal analysts debating the implications of a judge being profiled and arrested. His email inbox was flooded with interview requests and messages of support from colleagues. The phone rang again, his mother calling from her hospital room. She'd seen the news on her television. Marcus, baby, are you all right? Her voice was weak but determined. I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry about me. You focus on getting better. Don't you tell me not to worry. She scolded with a hint of her usual spirit. I was marching for civil rights before you were born. Some things never change, do they? No, Marcus agreed quietly. Some things don't. After reassuring her and promising to visit tomorrow, Marcus hung up and sat in the darkness of his office, surrounded by law books and framed photographs documenting his career. His judicial oath hung on the wall opposite his desk, the words suddenly seeming both more important and more hollow than ever before. From his bookshelf, he pulled down several volumes on judicial ethics and precedents. There was something he needed to research, a question of recusal and judicial propriety. As he flipped through case law, Vanessa appeared at the door with a cup of tea. The children are finally asleep, she said, setting the cup beside him. Jamal wanted to stay up and help you prepare a case against the officers. Marcus smiled faintly. Like mother, like son. And Vanessa perched on the edge of his desk. What are you planning, Marcus? I know that look. I just checked tomorrow's docket, he said, turning his computer screen toward her. Judge Sanderson was scheduled to hear a police misconduct hearing involving officers from the Abington Township precinct. Vanessa scanned the screen, her eyes widening. The same precinct as your arresting officers. Marcus nodded, and Judge Sanderson just called in sick with a severe case of food poisoning. Guess who's next in the rotation to take his cases? Understanding dawned on Vanessa's face, followed by concern. Marcus, the appearance of conflict will be addressed, he finished. I've been researching the precedents. There's no absolute requirement for recusal in this situation, especially since my case and the one on the docket are technically separate matters. Technically, Vanessa emphasized. You know, the police union will challenge this. Let them, Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly. For once, let the system work the way it's supposed to. As midnight approached, Marcus finally went upstairs to shower. The hot water couldn't wash away the memory of concrete against his cheek or metal cuffs biting into his wrists. He examined his body in the mirror, noting the bruises beginning to form where Officer Brennan had gripped his arms, physical evidence. As a judge, he'd heard countless testimonies from black men about similar experiences. How many had he truly believed? Had he become too comfortable in his position of authority, too removed from the reality faced by those without a judicial ID card? As a young law student at Howard University, he'd been passionate about reforming the system from within. Somewhere along the way, had he become part of that very system? What would you do if you were Judge Holloway? Would you recuse yourself from the case or use your position to ensure justice? Comment number 1. If you believe you should step aside to avoid conflict of interest, or number 2, if you think you should preside over the case and hold these officers accountable. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice through storytelling. Now, let's see what Judge Holloway decides to do with this unexpected opportunity to confront systemic racism from the bench. The morning sun cast long shadows across Philadelphia as Officers Thomas Brennan and Kyle Reynolds arrived at the precinct for their shift. They'd spent a restless night, but not because of guilt. Their concern was purely bureaucratic. Would there be paperwork fallout from the judge incident? Captain Preston had assured them it would be handled, that the department would close ranks as always. Administrative leave with pay at worst, he'd promised. Still, the viral video complicated things. As they changed into their uniforms, their phones buzzed simultaneously with a department-wide message. All officers involved in pending misconduct cases report to Philadelphia County Courthouse, courtroom 4B 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. Reynolds glanced at Brennan. That's us with the Johnson complaint, right? Brennan nodded, buttoning his shirt. Routine hearing. Sanderson's presiding. He always sides with the department. The sergeant poked his head into the locker room. Brennan Reynolds, captain wants to see you before you head to court. In the captain's office, Preston looked unusually tense. Just a formality today, he assured them, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. The Johnson complaint is baseless. Man was clearly resisting, and you followed protocol. The officers nodded confidently. They'd been through this dance before. Civilian complains. Internal Affairs investigates. Nothing happens. The system worked exactly as designed. Just answer questions directly. Stick to the report language, and remember your training was proper. Preston continued. What about last night? Reynolds asked that judge. Preston waved dismissively. Being handled at the commissioner level. Separate issue entirely. As they left for court, Brennan elbowed Reynolds. Maybe we'll see the judge want to be filing his complaint while we're there. They chuckled, unaware of what awaited them. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Holloway entered the courthouse through the judge's private entrance. The security guards, who'd known him for years, were unusually solicitous this morning. Good to see you, Judge Holloway, said Jackson, the senior guard. Saw the news. Shameful how they treated you. Marcus thanked him with a nod and continued to his chambers. The courthouse was already buzzing with whispers and side glances. His judicial robe hung on the back of his door, the black fabric suddenly seeming more significant than ever before. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Judge Diane Chin entered without waiting for a response, closing the door firmly behind her. You should have called me the moment they pulled you over, she said without preamble. As his closest colleague on the bench, and a formidable jurist in her own right, Chin never minced words. I hear you're taking Sanderson's docket today. Marcus nodded, arranging files on his desk. Food poisoning apparently. Chin folded her arms, including the Abington Township misconduct hearing. Marcus, the appearance of conflict is something I've considered carefully, he finished. I've reviewed the judicial ethics guidelines. There's no technical requirement for recusal. Technical, she echoed, just as Vanessa had. The police union will throw a fit. Let them, Marcus said, meeting her gaze. Diane, when was the last time an officer faced real consequences in your courtroom or mine? Chin didn't answer immediately. They both knew the statistics. Police misconduct cases rarely resulted in meaningful disciplinary action. You're walking a fine line, she finally said. I know, Marcus acknowledged, but sometimes justice requires it. Chin studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll be in courtroom 3 if you need backup. As she reached the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, I think you're right. Just be careful. After she left, Marcus' clerk entered with the day's files. The Abington Township case has some last-minute filings. Your Honor, she said, placing a thick folder on his desk. And there's been unusual media interest. Thank you, Sophia. Please make sure court security is prepared. Marcus opened the file, studying the complaint filed by Antoine Johnson, a 24-year-old black man who alleged excessive force and racial profiling during a traffic stop. The officers named in the complaint Thomas Brennan and Kyle Reynolds. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The very same officers who had arrested him last night. He reviewed the internal affairs investigation, which had predictably cleared the officers of wrongdoing despite witness statements supporting Johnson's account. Attached were personnel files showing 5 previous complaints against Brennan and 7 against Reynolds, all dismissed or marked unfounded. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. A knock at the door announced Sandra Whitman, the district attorney, assigned to prosecute police misconduct cases. She entered cautiously, her expression suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Holloway, about today's hearing. Good morning, MS. Whitman, Marcus replied professionally. I assume you're here to discuss whether I should recuse myself. She nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Given last night's incident, the department has concerns about impartiality. I've reviewed the ethics guidelines thoroughly, Marcus said. There's no absolute requirement for recusal. The matter before the court today involves different facts and different parties than my personal situation, but the same officers, Whitman pointed out, and the same precinct. Indeed, Marcus acknowledged, which gives me relevant insight into departmental practices. He stood, signaling the conversation was ending. I'll hear any formal motion for recusal in open court, Ms. Whitman. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare. As she left, Marcus noticed the clock nearly 10. He put on his judicial robe, feeling its weight differently today. This garment that had always represented authority and respect now felt like armor for the battle ahead. He gathered the case files and moved toward the courtroom, each step deliberate and measured. The hallway fell silent as he passed court personnel and attorneys watching with undisguised curiosity. Outside courtroom 4B, a crowd had gathered. Reporters with press badges, community activists with buttons and signs, uniformed officers standing in solidarity. Marcus nodded to the bailiff, who opened the heavy wooden doors. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Antoine Johnson sat with his public defender at one table. At the other, officers, Brennan and Reynolds, conferred with their union attorney, their backs to the entrance. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The Court of Common Pleas for Philadelphia County is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marcus Holloway presiding. As Marcus ascended to the bench, he watched recognition dawn on the officers' faces. Brennan froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open slightly. Reynolds palled visibly, his eyes darting to his attorney in panic. The union lawyer looked confused by his client's reactions until he connected the judge's name with a viral video. Marcus took his seat, arranging his files with practiced calm despite the electricity in the air. Be seated, he instructed the courtroom. As the crowd settled, the tension remained palpable. Marcus looked directly at Officers Brennan and Reynolds, the same men who had pressed his face against a car just 14 hours earlier. Good morning, he said, his voice steady and authoritative. We are here in the matter of Johnson versus Abington Township Police Department, a complaint of misconduct and excessive force. He paused, allowing the extraordinary circumstance to settle over the courtroom. Before we proceed, I should acknowledge that I recognize Officers Brennan and Reynolds from a personal encounter last night, which some of you may have seen reported in the media. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The union attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, in light of this admission, we respectfully request your immediate recusal from this case. Marcus had anticipated this. Your objection is noted, Counselor. I'll hear formal arguments on that motion momentarily. He turned to Antoine Johnson, a young man whose expression reflected disbelief at this unexpected turn of events. Mr. Johnson, are you prepared to proceed today? Johnson nodded, still processing what was happening. Yes, Your Honor. Marcus addressed the entire courtroom. Let me be clear. Justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done. The question before us is whether I can preside impartially over this matter. I believe I can, but I will hear arguments to the contrary. He nodded to the union attorney. You may present your motion for recusal. As the attorney approached the podium, Marcus could see Officers Brennan and Reynolds whispering urgently to each other. They looked nothing like the confident, aggressive men from the gas station. Now, in their eyes, Marcus recognized something he'd seen countless times from his bench. The sudden, shocking realization that actions have consequences, and sometimes justice arrives in forms we least expect. The police union attorney, Maxwell Gordon, approached the podium with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning. His silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but the unexpected situation had clearly rattled him. Your Honor, he began, his voice carrying through the now silent courtroom. Given your personal interaction with my clients last night, there is clear potential for bias in these proceedings. Judicial Canon 3 requires recusal when a judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Marcus listened attentively, his expression neutral. The appearance of impropriety alone necessitates your recusal, Gordon continued. Furthermore, your personal knowledge of disputed evidentiary facts concerning these officers creates an insurmountable conflict. When Gordon finished, Marcus turned to the public defender. Ms. Rivera, your response to the motion, Gabriela Rivera stood, her worn briefcase and department store suit a stark contrast to Gordon's polished appearance. Your Honor, we oppose the motion for recusal. The incident involving yourself and these officers is separate from our case. If anything, it provides valuable context about officer conduct. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The judiciary doesn't require recusal merely because a judge has relevant knowledge. By that standard, no judge with experience in criminal law could ever preside over a criminal case. Marcus nodded. Thank you, Counselor. He turned to the district attorney. Miss Whitman, as prosecutor, what is your position? Sandra Whitman rose reluctantly. The Commonwealth takes no position on recusal, Your Honor. We defer to the court's judgment on matters of judicial ethics. Marcus knew this non-answer reflected the DA's office's reluctance to challenge police in any meaningful way. He took a moment to consider, though his decision had been made hours earlier after careful research. The motion for recusal is denied, he announced firmly. Gordon immediately protested. Your Honor, this is unprecedented. You were personally involved in an altercation with these officers. Marcus raised his hand. Mr. Gordon, let me be clear. Justice is meant to be blind, but that blindness refers to impartiality, not ignorance. My experience does not disqualify me. Rather, it provides relevant insight into policing practices that may bear directly on this case. He leaned forward slightly. Throughout our judicial history, judges have not recused themselves merely because they have knowledge relevant to the proceedings. By your logic, a judge who had experienced medical malpractice should never hear a malpractice case, or a judge who had witnessed discrimination should never hear a discrimination case. The courtroom remained utterly silent as Marcus continued. The judicial oath requires us to administer justice without respect to persons. It does not require us to administer justice without respect to reality. I am fully capable of separating my personal experience from the facts of this specific case. Gordon appeared ready to object again, but Marcus continued. Your objection is preserved for the record, Counselor. We will proceed with the hearing. He turned to Ms. Rivera. You may call your first witness. Rivera nodded. The complainant calls Antoine Johnson. A young black man in a pressed shirt and tie approached the witness stand. After being sworn in, he sat nervously, eyes darting between the judge and the officers who had arrested him. Mr. Johnson, Rivera began. Please tell the court about your encounter with Officers Brennan and Reynolds on March 14th of this year. Johnson cleared his throat. I was driving home from my night shift at the hospital. I'm a nursing assistant. It was around 11:30 at night when I noticed a police car following me. I wasn't speeding or anything, but they followed me for about 5 blocks before turning on their lights. As Johnson described being pulled over for a supposedly broken taillight, which mechanics' records later confirmed was functioning properly, Marcus noted the similarities to countless other cases he'd heard, the vague reason for the stop, the immediate aggression, the escalation when the citizen questioned the officer's actions. They asked where I was coming from, where I was going. Johnson continued. When I asked why I'd been pulled over, Officer Brennan told me to stop being difficult. They ordered me out of the car, said they smelled marijuana. Johnson shook his head. I don't use drugs. I told them they could search the car, but I wanted them to tell me why I was being stopped first. What happened next? Rivera prompted. Officer Reynolds grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the car. Johnson said, his voice tightening. They pushed me against the hood, handcuffed me. Officer Brennan kept saying I was resisting, but I wasn't fighting at all. They searched my car and found nothing, but they still took me in for resisting arrest and obstruction. After Johnson's testimony, Rivera called a witness who had recorded part of the incident. The cell phone video showed Johnson standing calmly while being handcuffed, directly contradicting the officer's written report, claiming he had been aggressive and uncooperative. Next came 2 previous complainants against the same officers, both black men who described nearly identical scenarios, vague reasons for being stopped, immediate escalation, excessive force, and false charges that were later dropped. Throughout these testimonies, Marcus noticed Officers Brennan and Reynolds growing increasingly uncomfortable. They whispered constantly to their attorney, who looked increasingly concerned. When Rivera introduced the officer's body camera footage from Johnson's arrest, The discrepancy between their report and reality became undeniable. The footage showed Johnson being compliant throughout the encounter, even as the officers grew increasingly aggressive. The camera somehow malfunctioned after this point, Rivera noted, as the footage abruptly ended just as Johnson was being handcuffed. Conveniently, at the exact moment Mr. Johnson was allegedly becoming aggressive, the pattern was familiar to everyone in law enforcement camera malfunctions during critical moments of escalation. Gordon objected repeatedly throughout the proceedings, but each objection seemed weaker than the last. His client's case was unraveling before his eyes. Marcus maintained strict impartiality in his rulings, granting objections when warranted and overruling them when not. No one watching could claim he was allowing his personal experience to influence his judgment, though the parallels between Johnson's case and his own were impossible to ignore. Just before the lunch recess, an unexpected visitor entered the courtroom. Mr. Patel, the gas station manager from last night, slipped into a back row seat. During the break, he approached Rivera and showed her something on his phone. When court resumed, Rivera had a surprise. "Your Honor, we have an additional witness who has just come forward with relevant evidence." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Proceed, counselor." "We call Raj Patel to the stand." Mr. Patel approached nervously, taking the oath with a slight tremble in his voice. After establishing his identity as the manager of the Sunoco station where Marcus had been arrested, Rivera asked, "Mr. Patel, do Officers Brennan and Reynolds frequent your gas station?" "Yes, almost every night on their patrol night," Patel confirmed. "And have you observed their interactions with customers?" "Many times," Patel nodded. "They often question black and brown customers, especially young men, asking what they're doing there." "It's a gas station. They're buying gas." Gordon objected. "Your Honor, this testimony about unrelated incidents is irrelevant and prejudicial. It establishes pattern and practice." "Your Honor," Rivera countered, "directly relevant to whether Mr. Johnson's experience was isolated or part of a systemic issue." Marcus considered. Objection overruled. "The witness may continue." Patel then revealed his most damaging evidence. "After what happened to you last night, Judge, I checked our security footage. We keep recordings for 14 days for insurance purposes." Rivera approached with a laptop. "Your Honor, Mr. Patel has provided gas station security footage from March 14th, the night of Mr. Johnson's arrest." Marcus felt the courtroom collectively hold its breath. The footage shows Officers Brennan and Reynolds at the gas station approximately 1 hour before they pulled over Mr. Johnson. They can be heard discussing their plans to meet their monthly quota of stops. Gordon jumped to his feet. "Objection. This evidence wasn't disclosed during discovery because Mr. Patel only came forward today," Rivera explained, "and the defense has had ample opportunity to request security footage from businesses along Mr. Johnson's route." Marcus weighed the objection carefully. "The evidence is admitted conditionally. Mr. Gordon will have opportunity to review and challenge it." As the footage played on the courtroom monitor, Officers Brennan and Reynolds watched their recorded selves with growing horror. Their casual conversation about finding some action and needing 1-2 more stops to meet quota echoed through the silent courtroom. Reynolds was clearly heard saying, "Let's check the south side of town. Always good for a few stops there." The south side was predominantly black and Latino. Marcus observed the officers' reactions rather than the video itself. Brennan stared at the floor, while Reynolds whispered frantically to Gordon. The pattern of targeted harassment was becoming undeniable, not just in Johnson's case, but as a departmental practice. As if sensing the mounting evidence against his clients, Gordon requested a brief recess to confer. Marcus granted it, watching Officers Brennan and Reynolds follow their attorney out of the courtroom. Their earlier confidence completely evaporated. When they returned, Gordon announced they would like to call Captain William Preston to testify about departmental policies. As Preston was sworn in, Marcus noted the captain's nervous glances toward the officers. Their strategy was clear shift blame to department-wide policies rather than individual officer conduct. What they didn't realize was that this approach would open the door to examining the entire system, not just 2 officers' actions. And that was precisely what Marcus had hoped for. All along, Captain Preston's testimony began as a practiced defense of departmental policies. With 27 years on the force, he projected confident authority as he described officer training, use of force guidelines, and community policing initiatives. Our officers are thoroughly trained in constitutional principles, Preston assured the court. We emphasize de-escalation and proportional response. But the facade began to crack under Rivera's cross-examination. Captain Preston, does your department use quotas for traffic stops or arrests? Preston shifted uncomfortably. We have performance metrics, not quotas. Officers are expected to be proactive. And how are these metrics measured? Rivera pressed. By number of stops, number of arrests. Activity levels are one factor in performance evaluations, Preston admitted reluctantly. And officers who don't meet these activity levels are penalized in some way. Preston's hesitation spoke volumes. Their performance reviews may reflect lower initiative. Rivera nodded. So officers have incentive to make stops regardless of constitutional justification. Gordon objected, but the damage was done. When Officers Brennan and Reynolds took the stand, their testimonies immediately contradicted each other on key details. Brennan claimed Johnson had reached toward his waistband, while Reynolds testified Johnson had made a sudden move toward the glove compartment. Neither of these alleged movements appeared in the body camera footage, and neither officer had mentioned them in their initial report. Marcus observed their growing discomfort with clinical detachment. He'd seen this pattern countless times, officers constructing post hoc justifications that fell apart under scrutiny. Officer Brennan, he interjected during Gordon's questioning. You testified that you stopped Mr. Johnson because his tail light was out correct. Brennan nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Yet the mechanics inspection conducted the following morning showed all lights functioning properly. How do you explain this discrepancy? Brennan swallowed hard. It must have been repaired before the inspection, Your Honor. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And you testified that Mr. Johnson was belligerent and uncooperative, yet the portion of body camera footage we do have shows him being calm and compliant. Could you explain the discrepancy as well? He became aggressive after the camera malfunctioned, Brennan insisted. That's quite convenient, Marcus observed, making a note in the file. As the questioning continued, Officer Reynolds began to show signs of strain. His answers became hesitant, his eyes darting to Brennan or Gordon for guidance. When Rivera pressed him about the gas station conversation regarding quotas, he stammered. That's just how we talk. It doesn't mean anything. So, you weren't actually planning to make stops to meet a quota? Rivera asked. Reynolds looked trapped. It's complicated. There's pressure to show results. Pressure from whom? Byra asked. Reynolds glanced at Captain Preston, then back at his lap. From supervision from the department culture. Gordon tried to redirect, but Reynolds had already revealed more than intended. During a brief recess, Marcus noticed a young officer enter the courtroom and speak quietly with Rivera. When proceedings resumed, Rivera had a new witness. The complainant calls Officer Daryl Jackson. The young black officer who had recognized Marcus at the station approached the stand nervously. After being sworn in, he glanced apologetically at his fellow officers. Officer Jackson, Rivera began. How long have you been with the Abington Township Police Department? 14 months, ma'am, he replied. During your training, what were you taught about conducting stops in certain neighborhoods? Jackson hesitated. We were told to be more vigilant in high-crime areas. And how were these areas defined? Jackson looked uncomfortable. Mostly the south and east sides of town, predominantly minority neighborhoods. Were you given specific training on what constitutes reasonable suspicion for a stop? Officially, yes, Jackson said cautiously. But unofficially, he trailed off. Unofficially, what Officer Jackson? Rivera Promptiv. Jackson took a deep breath. Experienced officers told rookies that certain behaviors were suspicious when observed in certain neighborhoods or with certain individuals. Could you be more specific way? Rivera asked. Jackson looked directly at Marcus. We were told that a black man driving a nice car in a white neighborhood was suspicious, that a young black male with a hoodie was automatically suspicious, that furtive movements could be interpreted broadly. Gordon objected vehemently. but Marcus overruled him. The witness is testifying to his direct experience during training. The objection is overruled. Jackson continued describing how Brennan and Reynolds were considered productive officers because they made frequent stops and arrests, particularly of minorities. After Judge Holloway was brought in last night, Jackson added, "I overheard Officer Brennan say they got another one before they realized who he was." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Marcus maintained his composure, though hearing his arrest, described as a trophy catch, made his stomach turn. "And what happened after they realized Judge Holloway's identity?" Rivera asked. Jackson's answer was damning. Captain Preston gathered everyone involved and said, "We needed to get our story straight because judges stick together." He instructed dispatch to alter the call log to show they had received a specific complaint about a suspicious person matching the judge's description. This revelation sent shock waves through the courtroom. Evidence tampering was a criminal offense. Captain Preston's face had turned ashen. As Jackson's testimony continued, Reynolds seemed to be having an internal struggle. Finally, during another brief recess, he approached his attorney and had an intense conversation. When court resumed, Gordon addressed the bench. "Your Honor, Officer Reynolds has requested a private conference with the court and counsel." Marcus considered the request. "We'll convene in chambers. Officer Reynolds, Ms. Rivera, Mr. Gordon, and the court reporter only." In the privacy of his chambers, Reynolds sat with shoulders slumped. "I want to clarify some things," he began hesitantly. "What I said earlier about pressure and department culture, it's worse than I indicated." Gordon tried to intervene, but Reynolds continued, "We're trained to use certain phrases in our reports. Furtive movements, match the description, appeared nervous. They're code words that justify stops without specific reasonable suspicion." He looked up at Marcus. "Last night with you, we had no real reason to stop you except I was black at a gas station in a white neighborhood." Marcus finished for him. Reynolds nodded miserably. "It's how we're trained, not officially, but through the culture. You get rewarded for being proactive in certain neighborhoods with certain people." His testimony implicated not just himself and Brennan, but the entire command structure. By the time they returned to the courtroom, word had spread that Reynolds was cooperating. Brennan looked betrayed. Captain Preston furious. The district attorney, sensing the shifting tide, requested a brief recess to reassess the Commonwealth's position. During this break, community members in the gallery whispered about the unprecedented turn of events. Many had witnessed or experienced similar police encounters, but had never seen officers held accountable. When proceedings resumed, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The district attorney announced that in light of new evidence, the Commonwealth was expanding its investigation to include departmental policies and potential criminal charges for evidence tampering. Gordon, seeing his defense crumbling, requested time to confer with his clients about a potential settlement. But before Marcus could rule on this request, Brennan suddenly rose from his seat. This as he exploded, his face contorted with anger. "We were doing our jobs. If you people would just comply, instead of always making everything about race." Gordon frantically tried to silence him, but Brennan's outburst continued, revealing the deep-seated prejudice beneath his badge. "You all want special treatment. Even as a judge, you think you're above the law." The courtroom froze in shock at this display. Reynolds stared at his partner in horror, physically moving his chair away as though to distance himself from Brennan's words. Marcus allowed the outburst to continue for a moment, letting everyone present hear the unfiltered truth before finally saying, "Officer Brennan, that's enough." His calm authority instantly silenced the room. "Your comments are now part of the record." He turned to the court reporter. "Please ensure that Officer Brennan's statement is transcribed in full." Looking back at Brennan, whose rage was now mixed with the dawning realization of what he'd done, Marcus added, "Sometimes people reveal their true character when under pressure. Thank you for your candor, officer." The defense had completely collapsed, but the implications extended far beyond this courtroom. What had begun as a hearing about one man's complaint had exposed an entire system of discriminatory policing, and it had happened because two officers had chosen the wrong black man to profile at a gas station. Do you believe Officer Reynolds was right to come forward about departmental practices, Or was he just trying to save himself? Comment number 1, if you think he showed genuine remorse, or number 2, if you think he was just looking out for himself when he saw the case falling apart. Hit that like button if you were shocked by Brennan's outburst, and subscribe for more stories that expose systemic injustice. As we continue, what consequences do you think should come from this revelation? A departmental overhaul, criminal charges, or something else entirely? The remainder of the afternoon saw the hearing transform from an examination of individual misconduct into a systematic review of departmental practices. Marcus allowed this expansion of scope despite Gordon's repeated objections. Your Honor, Gordon protested. This case is about a specific complaint against specific officers, not an indictment of the entire department. Marcus regarded him steadily. Mr. Gordon, when evidence suggests that individual actions reflect institutional patterns, the court has not only the right, but the obligation to examine those patterns. The public interest demands nothing less. With this ruling, Marcus effectively put the entire system on trial. Rivera seized the opportunity, calling additional witnesses who had filed complaints against the department. Their testimonies formed a damning pattern. Black and Latino residents were stopped at rates 5 times higher than white residents. Vague matching and description justifications were disproportionately used for minority stops. Officers who focused stops on minority neighborhoods received better evaluations and faster promotions. As she stepped out of the Bentley, the brisk New York air carried whispers of car horns and chatter, but Evelyn's thoughts were already 2 steps ahead. She wanted to believe her team understood Aurora Lux's core values, that they treated every visitor with the dignity she'd been denied so many times growing up, but experience had taught her to prepare for disappointment. The real question wasn't whether her staff would make mistakes. It was how far their assumptions would go when they believed no one important was watching. Inside Aurora Lux was a cathedral of excess. The marble floors gleamed like a frozen river, reflecting the sparkle of chandeliers that cascaded from ceilings 2 stories high. Rows of meticulously arranged couture dresses floated on minimalist racks, each one priced higher than most people's annual rent. A curated playlist of soft jazz drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of imported orchids and polished leather. The atmosphere was designed to soothe, to inspire awe. But beneath its perfection, Evelyn could sense the tension that often haunted such spaces. The invisible hierarchy, the silent judgments that thrived just beneath the surface. The moment she crossed the threshold, Evelyn felt at the shift. Not in the air, not in the lighting, but in the glances. Jennifer Mollery, the 39-year-old store manager with a resume polished to a high gloss, clocked her immediately. Evelyn saw it in the way Jennifer's eyes flicked over her outfit, paused on her skin, and then darted toward Brad Whitaker, the 27-year-old sales associate who wore entitlement like cologne. Jennifer didn't need to speak. The slight arch of her brow was enough. Brad's smirk said the rest. Watch her. There was still resistance from officers who preferred the old ways. Some community members remained skeptical, their trust eroded by decades of negative experiences. The reforms in Abington Township were just beginning to spread to neighboring jurisdictions. Change was neither perfect nor complete. Transformation isn't an event. It's a process. Marcus concluded what happened at that gas station 6 months ago revealed deep problems in our system. But it also revealed something essential about our community's character, our capacity to confront uncomfortable truths and commit to building something better. He looked across the diverse faces before him. The question was never whether we could create perfect policies. The question was whether we had the courage to examine our flaws honestly and the commitment to address them persistently. Today, I believe the answer is yes. As the meeting transitioned to open discussion, Marcus stepped back from the podium. Through the large windows of the community center, he could see the street where patrol cars now moved through neighborhoods, not as occupying forces, but as partners in public safety. There was a different feeling in the air, not naive optimism, but something more sustainable, determined hope. Later that evening, Marcus pulled into that same SoCo station to fill his tank. As he stood beside his car, he noticed a young black man at the next pump watching a police officer inside the convenience store. There was still weariness in the young man's posture, the learned vigilance that remained necessary. But when the officer emerged and nodded respectfully in their direction, something subtle shifted in the young man's expression. Marcus caught his eye, and they exchanged a silent acknowledgement, not a problem solved, but of progress made. As Marcus drove home, he reflected on how a moment of injustice had become a catalyst for change.